Good evening, everyone. We invite the last people to sit down. So good evening, dear students, dear alumni, dear business leaders, entrepreneurs, members of the civil society, dear professors and collaborators, welcome to HEC Paris. We are very happy to have you here to participate in the, I hope, the interesting debates, exchange of ideas, and on this extremely hot topic of climate change. I'm honored to introduce Eloic Peyrache, Associate Dean of HEC Paris, and Karine Sanouillet, Managing Director of the HEC Alumni Association, for the opening of this inspiring evening session.
Dear all, we're absolutely delighted to see so many of you tonight. So this evening is part of a process launched by the COP21 in Paris, but many events will punctuate the coming months at HEC.
This event is the first on many accounts. It's the first high-profile event on a specific theme to be organized for the benefit of the whole HEC community, that is to say for both alumni and students. It is also the first statement by the alumni community on the important subject of climate change. Why is it important to engage our alumni and students community on this subject? Well, given their professional positions or future professional positions, they are clearly in a position to move forward on actions to limit climate change, whatever the sector of activity. Also, the HEC community has always been concerned with the future and preparing for the future. It's part of our DNA. So the presence of 1,000 of you tonight, students, graduates, professors, decision makers, or future decision makers this evening is very encouraging.
So the Center for Society and Organization is the initiator of this evening and played a major role in its implementation. This center is at the very heart of the future of HEC, because we strongly believe that to be among the world academic institution in the future, HEC has to be a carrier of meaning. So therefore, I would like to thank all the members of the center, professors and staff, all the students, primarily those of the MSc in Sustainability and Social Innovation, and all the students involved in the HEC Net Impact Club, all the alumni, and also all the donors, alumni and corporation of the S&O Center, Danone, Schneider, Renault, Engie, and also of the Energy and Finance Chair, Deloitte and Société Générale. In a word, those who make things happen in this center and makes this center very promising for the future of HEC. So we are very privileged tonight to host prominent and highly mobilized personalities on social impact and climate issues. This will be done as part of a lesson in a minute, and we will proceed on a roundtable, and the General Director of HEC will close the session. We will immediately make room for our first guest, Mr. Jeremy Rifkin. Well, I doubt we need to present Jeremy Rifkin, American essayist, scientific and economic perspective specialist. He has published numerous bestsellers: The End of Work, The Age of Access, The Empathic Civilization, and you have necessarily heard and read, I hope, The Third Industrial Revolution, and more recently, the Zero Marginal Cost Society. For all our students in their econ class these days, zero marginal costs should ring the bell somehow. Mr. Rifkin also puts in practice all his work in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais, in France, or in China, where he stays often these days. His work, and all my apologies to make it so short, focuses on exploring new scientific and technological potential and the impact on society and environment. So, Mr. Rifkin, we are very let me say, excited of having you with us tonight. So please welcome, he should be Mr. Jeremy Rifkin.
You can feel free to do the same. I overdressed. Good evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be in Paris and to be at this great business school. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to start on a somber note, though. And I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. But first, I have a ground rule. Put all the cameras down, put all the iPads down, put all the smartphones down, and don't go into withdrawal symptoms. Put it all down. We're going to have a nice, quiet setting. And if you're professional camera people, we need to move to the back. I'm going to start on a somber note. I hope it'll end up being somewhat of a liberating reflection. You will judge. GDP is slowing in every country in the world, no exception. And the reason that's happening is productivity has been declining all over the world for 20 years. And productivity is the key to GDP. We have a younger generation, a digital generation, unemployed all over the world. And now, here we are in 2015, after two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, and the best we can say about the economic system we created is A, the 80 richest individuals in the world tonight, 80 people, their combined wealth now equals the total wealth of 1/2 of the human race. What do you think of that? Now this economic crisis is compounded by a more profound environmental crisis. After two industrial revolutions in which we dug up the carbon deposits of a previous period in history and exhumed them to create this civilization, we now find ourselves in real-time climate change. And I have to tell you, I've been working on this issue for 45 years, and I got it wrong. I thought we had more time. I did not anticipate the feedback loops and the acceleration of those loops. And what's so terrifying about climate change, if you're a parent or a grandparent here or a student, this is never explained. The change in the temperature of the planet is shifting the water cycles of the Earth. That's what this is all about. It's absolutely terrifying. This is the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the water cycles and the cloud cycles traversing the Earth. We go to other planets. What's the first thing we want to know? Water. No water, not interested. We found out that it looks like there's going to be water on Mars 2 days ago. Everybody got excited. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on Earth from industrial-induced global warming emissions, the atmosphere is sucking up 7% more precipitation. The heat is forcing that precipitation into the clouds. We're getting more concentration of precipitation and more violent water events everywhere. More extreme winter snows, more dramatic spring flooding, more prolonged summer droughts, more Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes, tsunamis, and typhoons. This is happening everywhere. This is just 2015. Our ecosystems cannot catch up to this dramatic shift in the water cycle in a few decades. Our scientists now tell us we're in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. And those 6 extinction events are the big stories. And they all happened, for the first 5 happened before human beings were ever here. And each time there was a mass extinction event, the chemistry of the planet shifted very, very quickly, and we had massive die-out. And on the average, 10 million years to get life back on this little oasis in the universe. We're now in the 6th extinction event. And for you millennial students here, our scientists are telling us that by the time you're my age or your children are in their 40s, the last part of this century, we could see the massive die-out of over half the life forms on Earth, and we're not sure if we're going to make it. As my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of this moment. 99.5% of all the species of life that have ever inhabited this planet have come and gone. How's that for odds? We're the youngest species. We've been here 175,000 years, anatomically modern humans. It's the height of hubris to believe that we're going to be able to get through this crisis. To understand the crisis is one thing. To look open to a new door for opportunities is another. Let's see if we can open the door. And maybe we have an opportunity here, maybe, that can get us to where we need to go in time to hopefully alleviate the worst parts of climate change. To understand the crisis and opportunity, we need to know how the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur. If we know how they occur, we can get a roadmap here of what the business community and civil society and government need to do, and a compass to get us into the next journey in history. There have been at least 7 great economic paradigm shifts in our history, and they share a common denominator, which anthropologically is very interesting. At a certain moment of time, 3 defining technologies emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform. That's a fancy way of saying a new infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic activity across the value chains of society. What are those 3 defining technologies that converge for new paradigm shifts? Number 1, new communication technologies to allow us to more efficiently manage the economic activity. Number 2, new sources of energy so that we can more efficiently power the economic activity. And number 3, new transportation and logistics to more efficiently move the economic activity. When communication technologies, new forms of energy, new modes of transportation come together, they fundamentally realign the way we manage, power, and move economic life. This is the anthropology of economic change, and it's not in a single economic textbook in the world. Let me give you an example. 19th century, you'll have to put your camera down, young lady, and sit. 19th century, first industrial revolution, Britain. Communication, energy, and transport, manage, power, and move economic life. The Brits took us from manual printing to steam power printing, which was a huge leap forward in productivity, allowing us to manage communication more efficiently. Then in the second half of the 19th century, they laid off that telegraph system across the aisle. This communication technology revolution converged with a new power source, cheap coal in the hinterlands of England. And then they created a new technology to harvest it called a steam engine. Then they put the steam engine on rails and created locomotives for national transportation, national markets, dense urban life, first industrial revolution. Communication, energy, transport, manage, power, and move economic life. 20th century, the United States, second industrial revolution, again, another convergence. Centralized electricity, and especially the telephone, later radio and television, those communication technologies converged with cheap Texas oil, powered by a German invention, the internal combustion engine. And then Henry Ford put everybody on the roads with cars, buses, and trucks. And we matured the interstate highway systems after the war, World War II. That second industrial revolution took the whole world through the 20th century, and it peaked July 2008. If you remember that month, Brent crude oil hit a record of $147 a barrel on world markets. And when that happened in July 2008, purchasing power shut down everywhere in the world that month. That was the great economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was the aftershock. Our policy people still think the aftershock was the earthquake. We are now in the long sunset of this economic era. It's not just the Great Recession. The reason is this: our whole civilization, 2 industrial revolutions, is based on taking carbon out of the planet and making this way of life. Our fertilizers and our pesticides are made out of carbon deposits. Oil. Our construction material is made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceuticals are still fossil fuel based. Our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, our heat and light. So when energy starts to go over 95 a barrel, all the other prices go up. And when you get to that zone of 120 a barrel, purchasing power shuts down. Now, it's true the oil price is low now. That's because the economy is now contracting again. We hit another spike of 115 a barrel about a year ago, and there's a second reason. Now, the fossil fuel industry are fighting each other in the last days of this era. So OPEC has imposed this new idea of taking the prices down to 50 a barrel because they're wiping out shale gas and tar sands. And now they're going bankrupt all over America. And as soon as that happens, I'm saying this time next year, prices go up. So let me share an anecdote with you. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question, how do we grow the German economy on her watch? When I got to Berlin, the very first question I asked this new Chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how are you going to grow the German economy or the EU economy or the global economy as long as your business activity is operating on a second industrial revolution platform of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport, and that platform has matured its productive potential 20 years ago. Let me stop here for a moment. Let's talk about productivity. Our economists are writing these long articles saying, we don't understand why productivity is waning. We've got all these new killer products out of Silicon Valley and high tech and IT and digital this and that. What is the nature of productivity? Shouldn't that be the centerpiece? Shouldn't that be the one thing economists understand, right? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is something economists don't want to talk about. Kind of embarrassing. What is the nature of productivity? When Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for Economic Growth Theory in 1987, he let out the little secret. He said, we used to believe that there are two factors that define productivity: more capital for better machines and better performing workers. He said, we have a little problem though. When we track every single year of the Industrial Revolution, those two factors, they only account for about 14% of the productivity. So Robert Solow asked the big question, where's the other 86% of productivity come from? Don't know. It's called the Solow residual. Moses Abramowitz, former head of the American Economic Association, here's the way he said it, the direct quote. Quote, this is a measure of our ignorance. You bet. And the reason they don't know is because when classical economic theory was penned in the late 1700s, the vogue was Newton's physics. So everyone wanted to be scientific, and they borrowed his metaphors, including the early economic philosophers. For example, you know Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Adam Smith said he borrowed that metaphor, and that's how he came up with the invisible hand of supply and demand. Your French philosopher, Baptiste Say, he came up with his supply theory. Supply stimulates demand, generates supply, stimulates demand, unless disrupted. That's the first law. Body in motion stays in motion. There's only one thing wrong with using Newton's physics as metaphor to pen all of classical and neoclassical economic theory. Economic theory and economic practice has absolutely nothing to do with Newton's physics. Nothing. Economics is governed by the same laws that govern the universe. And those laws are the first and second laws of thermodynamics, the energy laws. They govern every conversion and activity in the universe and in our little biosphere and in our economic life. But those laws weren't discovered till the late 19th century when chemists were looking at energy flows through machines. By that time, economics was penned. There are two basic laws that govern energy in the universe. The first law is the conservation law. All the energy in the universe today has been here since the Big Bang and will be here to the final whimper. We've never seen energy created or destroyed in the universe as far as we know. That's the conservation law. But the second law says, well, that's true, but energy is always changing form from the Big Bang out, but only in one direction, from hot to cold, from concentrated to dispersed through the universe, from available to unavailable. Unavailable is energy that's still there, but it can't do useful work. It's called entropy. We are now paying the entropy bill in this biosphere. It's called CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide from 200 years of converting those deposits for the industrial way of life. There are three types of systems: open, closed, and isolated in terms of thermodynamics. An open system exchanges matter and energy with the outside world. A closed system exchanges energy, but it doesn't exchange matter with the outside world. An isolated system doesn't exchange matter or energy with the outside world. The Earth in relation to the solar system, A, B, or C? B. We're closed. We exchange plenty of energy with the sun, no problem there, but we don't exchange matter with the outside world here. Except for some meteorites and some cosmic dust every once in a while, what we have here is fixed. The rare earths, if you open up your smartphone, that's made up of all sorts of granular material with all sorts of rare earths that are fixed here from the time we blew off the sun. So energy is everything bounded in this earth, not just the fossil fuels, the rare earths, the metallic ore, the materials. Here's what economics is, although not in a single textbook. I take that back. It is in two. Georgescu Rogan's entropy law, Herman Daly's steady state, in my book, Entropy. But I don't think it's used much in the courses. We take low entropy available energy out of nature, a rare earth, a metallic ore, a fossil fuel. And at every step of conversion in our value chains, we have to embed energy into that product or service to move it to the next stage of its process, but we lose energy in the conversion. This is called the aggregate efficiency. That is the ratio of potential work to the actual useful work you get. So we're extracting things out of nature, and we're storing them and shipping them and moving them and processing them and producing things out of them and consuming and recycling them. At every step, energy embedded in, but energy lost in the conversion. Let me say that nature isn't that efficient. I know some of you got little kitty cats at home. We have two little cats we adore, but they are really very inefficient carnivores. The carnivores and the mammals are not efficient. When a carnivore mammal chases down and consumes a victim, only 10% of the energy of the victim gets embedded in the predator. The rest is heat loss in the transfer. What does this have to do with the next stage of the human journey? We started the second industrial revolution in 1903 at 3% aggregate efficiency, meaning every single conversion value chain, only 3% got embedded, the other was lost. By 1990, the United States got up to a peak of 13% aggregate efficiency. Nothing's changed since 1990. Japan got to 20% aggregate efficiency. Nothing's changed there since 1990. Every other industrial country that goes through this platform, they mature at around 13 to 20% aggregate efficiency. There's no way to go above that ceiling as long as you're plugging into a platform based on centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, and internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport. And we now know that aggregate efficiency amounts to most of the other 85% of productivity. Down the road at INSEAD, Bob Ayers, who's emeritus, some of you know, Kempel, many other physicists who went into economics, they simply plugged in one more factor, aggregate efficiency. And every single part of the Industrial Revolution every year, boom. Every engineer in this room could have told that to the economists. Because you study thermodynamics, it's kind of a smile to all of you. And if you're an architect, and if you're a chemist, and if you're a biologist, you understand this. Not a single business school in the world, maybe HEC will be the first, not a single business school in the world requires a single course on the laws of thermodynamics that govern all economic activity in the universe. I teach in the oldest business school in the world. I've been there for 45 years, teaching the advanced management program for executives, the Wharton School. We don't require it. Then we want to know why economics seems to be failing us as a discipline. So what does this have to do with the chancellor? She's a physicist. So I said to her on that first meeting, you can have market reforms, labor reforms, fiscal reforms, killer new technologies, but if you're plugging into that old system, you're not going to go anywhere. And that day I outlined a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport to manage power and move economic life in Germany. And at the end of the day, the chancellor said, Mr. Rifkin, we will have this for Germany. I'll report back to you what's happened in the last 10 years since we first got together. The communication internet has matured to manage economic life and social life. 25 years since the World Wide Web, everyone has their smartphone sitting there itching in your pocket, full of rare earths trying to be recycled. That communication internet is now converging with a digitalized renewable energy internet and an automated, digitalized, GPS-guided, and very, very soon driverless transport and logistics internet to create 3 internets in one seamless kernel to manage, power, and move economic life: communication, energy, and transport. These 3 internets, they ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We're embedding sensors in every device, every machine, every appliance, so that they can monitor real-time economic activity and send big data. Of course, nobody bothered to ask, including many of the companies in my group, well, where are they sending the big data to? Once you ask that, you get a big question mark. The whole purpose of that big data is to send it down the value chain to the communication, energy, and transport matrix so that everyone can manage power and move their economic value chain. So we have sensors in the factories monitoring the economic activity, sending the big data. We have sensors in the agricultural fields watching the soil content, the water content, looking at weather patterns. We have sensors in warehouses monitoring traffic flows, sensors in smart homes, looking at your efficiency, sensors in automobiles, warehouses, and they're all sending big data. By 2030, we're going to have ubiquitous interconnectivity. Every device, every human being in one neural network. We are externalizing the neural network of the human race. This is an external prothesis of our cognitive and neural system. It has huge potential because now we have 3 billion people connected. My trip last year, not the one this year, I'm working with Wang Yang, who's the vice premier. He shocked me. He said, well, Jeremy, guess what? We've got a smartphone now for $25 with more computing power than sent your boys to the moon. So if you're making $2 a day, it doesn't make any difference where you are. Everyone's going to be connected within 20, 15 years at the outside. So the upside of this is that we have the possibility now of connecting the whole human race in a external prothesis of the nervous system, the cognitive system of humanity, so we can engage each other directly and eliminate all the middlemen and the giant vertically integrated organizations that were the mediators in the 19th and 20th century. We have the prospect of democratizing economic life. But the moment we say this, and it's exciting, we get a little scared. Did he just say everything's going to be connected to everyone, ubiquitous? And the moment we see this huge opportunity to think as a human family on one planet, we immediately go to the dark side. What about network neutrality? How do we ensure governments and companies don't monopolize this Internet of Things platform for a third industrial revolution for political purposes or commercial purposes? How do we ensure privacy? How do we secure data? How do we prevent cyber crime and cyber terrorism? How do we build resiliency into the system? How do we prevent disruptions, both natural and human caused? These are huge political and social issues that will engage you young people well into the mid part of the century. You're going to see this as the central political struggle of the next 3 generations, addressing these issues. But assuming tonight that we can address these very heady issues, and it's a big question mark, here's the prospect. Everyone in this room has a value chain, whether you're a family, small business, large company, where you're always marshaling and moving and storing and producing and consuming and recycling things. This means that if you have a smartphone, you can go up on this emerging Internet of Things platform already, because it's emerging, and you can, at almost zero marginal cost, you just need the service provider, you can get a transparent picture of all the economic data flowing around the world. Oh my God. When I was a young student at Wharton in 1963, my first professor said, young man, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Sellers never want the buyers to know what the sellers know, correct? Now everybody knows what everyone knows. We think the Snowden affair was a big deal. Now we have economic data that's totally open and transparent. This could democratize economic life, and a younger generation of social entrepreneurs steeped in sustainability could democratize the way we organize our economic activity. Though it is potentially really enormous. So here's how it works. Let's say you have a co-op, a nonprofit, a small business, a big company. You can go up on the Internet of Things platform that's emerging and cut your swath of big data that concerns your value chain. Just cut it out of the data. Your swath, your value chain, your big data. Then you know what you can do. You can mine that data on your value chain with analytics, create your own algorithms, create your own apps, so that you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain, and by doing so, dramatically increase your productivity, reduce your marginal cost, so you can stay competitive in a digitalized, very streamlined, global, automated capitalist market. And some of your marginal cost will already approach zero marginal cost, meaning that some goods and services are going to be abundant, free, produced by each other for the rest of us outside the market in the sharing economy. Now, we're hearing a lot about the sharing economy. What is this sharing economy? Capitalism, we thought, it's a pretty old system. We didn't think it would ever get birth at its age, but it's given birth to a little progeny, and it's surprised as everybody else, frankly. Capitalism's given birth to the sharing economy. And this little fledgling economy, it's embryonic, it's unformed, it's kind of vague, and we're not sure how it's working. But what I would tell you, I suspect this is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the first half of the 19th century. It's a big deal. It's totally unformed. Now, capitalism, the parent, has to nurture this child that it gave birth to. It has to let it grow, let it find its identity, let it find its creativity, let it find its inner being, as we say. But if you're a parent, you know the child also transforms the parent every time. In this case, capitalism is going to be utterly transformed by the relationship it develops with this child as it nurtures its development. We are already seeing a hybrid economic system here in the millennial generation in this room. Part of your day, you're dealing with exchange of property in capitalist markets where there's a margin and profit. Part of the day, you're producing and sharing all sorts of goods and services with each other for nearly free at zero marginal cost outside the market in the sharing economy. Let's take a look at it. We have already seen the impact of digitalization in terms of reducing marginal cost to near zero and the disruptions they've created, because the first of the three internets is here. It's been 25 years since the web. So if we see what's happened with the communication internet, we're going to have a good picture tonight of what's happening now with the energy internet and transport and logistics. We always thought in the first and second industrial revolution that there are sellers and buyers, there's owners and workers. That's not going to go away. But we've got a new category here in the room. It's called prosumers. 3 billion people connected who at one time or another have produced and shared something for someone else at near zero marginal cost. We have millions of people right now tonight who are producing and sharing their own music at near zero marginal cost. The fixed cost of studio-type technology with your digital equipment is just like studios had 5 years ago. But the marginal cost is near zero. If you produce a piece of music, you want to share it, you can share it with one person or 1 billion people, near zero marginal cost, right? Doesn't cost you anything. We have millions of young people producing and sharing their own YouTube videos. All of YouTube is open source. No intellectual property, sharing the talents, near zero marginal cost. We have millions of young people that are producing and sharing news blogs and social media. And they're producing free ebooks. I got to tell you, my new book was out on Pirate Bay before we published, and they had it ranked before Amazon. We're not going to beat the young people. Better figure out how to join this, unless we outlaw all the technology. We have 6 million college students taking massive open online college courses taught by the best professors, the best universities, at near zero marginal cost. They're getting college credits. It's for free. Now, we're going to have to blend it with physical courses because there's a high dropout rate, but it's not going away. And what fascinates me is Wikipedia. I would have said this could never work. Millions of people constructing the knowledge of the world and fact-checking each other with more accuracy than our vertically integrated experts and authorities of the 20th century. And I can tell you, I look at our site, Apparently, people have nothing else to do all day but check every sentence of every site to see if you've made a mistake and cross-check each other. This is what people are doing, and it works. We're crowdsourcing the knowledge of the world. We've democratized knowledge on a nonprofit website. It's the 6th biggest website in the world. My Lord, I never thought that would happen. Some of the biggest industries of the 20th century have been disrupted. The music industry has shrunk. Television is a shadow of itself because the young people are producing and sharing all their videos with each other. Why they want to watch TV? The newspapers and magazines have gone out of business, book publishing suffering, but thousands of new enterprises have emerged, not just Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Thousands of startups, some of them profit, some of them nonprofit. They're creating the apps, the connectivity, and the platforms. So there can be a sharing economy. So part of it's capitalist market because the profit-making ones are using your data for third parties, but a lot of social entrepreneurialism is nonprofit as well. And I will say eventually more of it's going to be cooperatives because they can scale it more easily than capitalist enterprises. Watch what happens to Uber when all the young people who own their cars say, wait a minute, why are we working for Uber? It's our car, and we're sending profits to Silicon Valley, to Google. Why are we doing that? Why don't we just create a cooperative, get a low-interest loan from the bank? Anyone with any software knowledge can set up a GPS website, and then we share the revenue internally to our cooperative. We can do it cheaper because there's no profit to a third party. And if you have a choice here in Paris between Uber and Go Local with the same amount of efficiency and mobility, what would you choose? This conversation is now being had in the last 5 months everywhere I travel in the world. Uber didn't understand. They created a platform that by nature, its architecture is not vertical, it's distributed. The third industrial revolution platform. It's not centralized, it's collaborative. It's not top down, it scales laterally, not vertically. And there's the platform they created. Then they wanted to create a giant vertically integrated 20th century company to try to control a distributed collaborative platform in which low entry allows everyone to scale together in cooperatives. They didn't understand what they created. Not going to work for them. I love BlaBlaCar. I love Paris Lib with the electric vehicles. You're showing us the way. We thought there'd be a firewall here, and even though the near zero marginal cost phenomena would impact the virtual world of entertainment, news, and knowledge, we're democratizing entertainment, news, and knowledge. No more elites. But we didn't think it would move over the firewall to the physical world of atoms. What I'm saying in the new book, we have broken through the firewall. It's called the Internet of Things, and on top of that, communication, energy, transport. We now have millions of people who are producing their own solar and wind electricity at near zero marginal cost and sharing it off-grid or back to the grid. We have millions of young people in the millennial generation who are in car sharing services, and pretty soon the marginal costs, as I'll explain later, are going down, down, down to zero marginal cost. Let's go back to Germany. What's happened since that first meeting with the Chancellor 10 years ago? We're at 30% solar and wind power on the power grid of this huge country, Germany. 30% of all the power in this country, near zero marginal cost solar and wind. It's going to be 40% in 8 or 10 years. It's going to be 100% by 2040. Because the fixed cost of solar and wind, those fixed costs are on an exponential curve, just like computer chips. Now, when I was a little kid, we only had a few computers. They cost millions of dollars, and the chairman of IBM predicted there may be a need for 7 computers, maybe 7 computers. We didn't anticipate the Intel computer chip, exponential curves, double the capacity, half the cost every 2 years. China now has a $25 smartphone. But here's what's interesting. We're on a similar exponential curve now for energy, solar and wind. A solar watt cost $76 to generate in 1979. $76 a watt. It's 50 cents a watt today. It's 38 cents a watt in 18 months from now. Do you see what's happening? We have in my global group power and utility companies quietly, right now, in America and Europe, buying 20-year long-term contracts for solar and wind at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. It is over for fossil fuel and nuclear. We know this inside the industry. Who's generating all this? By the way, once you pay the fixed cost for your solar panel, your wind turbine, your geothermal heat pump, the marginal cost of the energy we're generating in Germany It's near zero. The sun has not sent us a bill. The wind has yet to invoice us, and the geothermal heat is quiet. It's all free. Imagine what happens on a platform where you bring communication energy together and every business can plug into that platform on every step of its conversion. How about that for aggregate efficiency, where you can move all your conversions at near zero marginal cost energy, and it's clean? Germany understands the journey. Who's producing the new power in Germany? There are 4 major power companies, EnBW, RWE, E.ON, and Vattenfall. They're vertically integrated global giants. We thought they were invincible. What happened to them in the last 10 years? It's the same thing that happened to the music companies, newspapers, magazines, television, and book publishing. Millions of small players, and this is happening in Denmark too, not just Germany, but millions of small players, farmers, small and medium-sized enterprises, urban dwellers, they came together and created electricity cooperatives, shared commons. Every one of them got low-interest loans from the banks. The government didn't do this. The banks gave them the loan because they could audit their energy savings, and they knew exactly how much premium energy would be sent to the grid. You pay back. There's no way to default. And they're producing the vast majority of this new power, millions of small players. This is power to the people, as we used to say in the 1960s. But this time it's figurative and literal. The big power companies are producing less than 7% of the energy. They're out of this game. They were the most efficient mechanisms for centralized energy. This is true. By creating vast, vertically integrated economies of scale, trust me, these were the most efficient mechanisms we could put out there. But they're not the most efficient in a platform that's designed to be distributed, collaborative, and open to communication, energy, and transport. You have to collect all this new energy in little bits, the sun here, the wind here, the geothermal heat. Every building and site is a node, and it favors lateral scale by cooperatives. Does this mean the end of the power companies? No, but they have to change their business model. Not tomorrow, but quick. We're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but the smart companies have to realize they have to also be in the third industrial revolution. Vertical integration, and now distributed open source lateral scale. So we said 7 years ago, I debated the chairman of E.ON, Mr. Tyson, at their request, 3-hour debate. He said, I said, here's a new business model, and I introduced it. He said, we'll never do it. He did it 4 months ago. Here's the model. We said we have millions of people producing their own green energy now. Within 10 years, it's going to be tens of millions. Within 20 years, hundreds of millions. The curves are there. This technology is going to be as cheap as your little smartphones. It's moving. We will create cooperatives all over the world, and it's going to move faster in the developing world because they have a liability that's an asset, no infrastructure. We know, we saw it with cell phones. It's easier to create virgin infrastructure and cheaper than to transform old infrastructure. This is moving across rural India and sub-Saharan Africa already. This is beginning to happen with this technology. So we said to the power companies, there's a new model. In the new model, you make money by selling less and less electricity. What you do is you establish, I know, that sounds counterintuitive. You set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises, and you help manage the data flow on their value chains with them. You help erect and manage the digitalized energy internet. And you help manage that big data with them so that you can help them with their analytics and algorithms and apps so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiency and productivity and reduce their marginal cost, and they'll share some of those productivity gains back with the power company. It's called performance contracts. More money, sell less electricity. And we don't need the power companies. If they don't want to erect it, Schneider's in my group, they'd like to do it. The IT companies in my group, they would like to do it. The Amazon, everybody would like to do it. Startup companies would like to do it. We don't need them. ERDF and EDF have joined us in Nord-Pas-de-Calais. We're laying out, cooperatively the region is, I should say, the first really advanced master plan here in France and Europe. And the CEO of EDF called personally. She's retired now, Michelle Ballon. She said, I'm going to join you. Mr. Poglio at ERDF said, let's talk. Met with the board. He said, we're there. GDF Suez. These companies are seeing you have to have two models, vertical integration, old energies, distributed energy's the new era. But they're going to have to collaborate on an even playing field with SMEs, startups, and everybody in this room. No more control from the top. Unless you think this is just Europe, Premier Lee came into office as President-in-Chief, Premier Lee, and I was kind of surprised. I had no dealings in China. He put out his official biography, and up front, I actually thought it was a joke at first. I said to my wife, this is strange, I just saw this. He had read the Third Industrial Revolution book, he said, he was a fan, and he had instructed the government of China to begin moving on the themes that I'm talking about to you tonight, and they are moving. I've been back and forth in China to show you how fast China moves. After my first visit with the Vice Premier and the government, 11 weeks later, the National Grid of China, the electricity grid chairman, announced an $82 billion four-year startup to completely digitalize the electricity grid of China in 4 years so that millions of Chinese people could produce and share their own solar and wind across the country. It's a revolution. The coming together of the communication internet with the digitalized renewable energy internet makes possible the automated GPS and soon driverless transport and logistics internet. You know, the automobile was the centerpiece of the entire second industrial revolution. We built the whole global economy on automobile purchases. The problem is the millennial generation of students in this room, you're not cooperating. You do not want to own vehicles, apparently. You want access to mobility. You know, owning a vehicle, that's grandma and grandpa, those two old cars sitting in the driveway, that's not us. My wife and I were sitting in a little restaurant, little Ethiopian restaurant down in kind of a hip part of Washington, saw a young millennial couple. They whipped out their smartphone. We knew what they were doing. They were on a street corner. Boom, they connected the communication internet and the website for car sharing. It immediately transferred them to the transportation logistics website for GPS. They locate a driver within 90 seconds of where they are, and within 90 seconds they were picked up, PayPal paid. Why would you ever want to own a car again? But for every car share, and you recall a book I wrote called The Age of Access in 2000? I said that the next generation would go from ownership to access. Thank God, thank you. You didn't make me out to be a fool, you're doing it. It took about 15 years. Larry Burns was the former executive vice president of General Motors. 5 years ago, he's been recently there. Well, we note that for every car shared, 15 cars are being eliminated from production. So Larry Burns did a study of Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a University of Michigan professor. And he found that even now with this incipient automated car sharing network, they could eliminate 80% of the vehicles in that city right now with better mobility, with the car sharing now in place. Extrapolate Larry Burns' study. We have 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world choking us in traffic, wasting our lives away. They are the #3 cause of global warming emissions. #1 is buildings. But in Germany, we are retrofitting every building and converting it into micro power plants in the surrounding sites so they're clean energy at zero marginal cost. And we're going to do that all over France and the rest of the world, hopefully in your generation. The #2 cause of global warming emissions I always mention because no one wants to talk about it, especially here in France, but everywhere. Even Al Gore won't talk about it. It's beef production, beef consumption, and animal husbandry agriculture, and it may even be #1. What's the matter with the human race? We're facing potential extinction, and nobody wants to bother to rethink the food chain and move down that food chain. If we can't do that, we're lost. The #3 cause of global warming emissions, transport. So we're going to eliminate, if Larry Burns is right, and his projection from that one city, we're going to eliminate 80% of the vehicles in the world in the next generation. And the rest of the 200 million vehicles will be electric, they'll be fuel cell, they'll be operating on near zero marginal cost renewable energy generated across continental internets. They'll be 3D printed with recomposited material, and they'll be driverless. The first printed car is out. It's called the Stratus. It's an Italian car, beautifully designed. The Italians and the French know design. I don't know. I'm not going to get into which one is better. You both know design. The rest of us are so far behind. So what does this mean? Starting with the millennials in this room, I will say to you, your children, your grandchildren are never going to own cars again. It's a steep curve. So what does this mean for the transportation industry? Change the business model. They're still selling millions of cars, except for Volkswagen. They're selling lots of cars now. That's a cheap shot, I guess. They're selling lots of vehicles, but we can see the curve with you, your generation. So increasingly, they're going to have to move from selling the vehicles to helping to erect and manage automated GPS-guided driverless transport networks for road and then rail and water. If they don't, there are so many other industries that would like to do it. It's about not one or the other, but how do you get from the old to the new? There are opportunities everywhere. And if you're into 3D printing here, that's the manufacturing, if you will, mechanism of the third industrial revolution. You plug that 3D printing into the platform, and you can increase your aggregate efficiencies and productivity and dramatically reduce your costs. You're into additive manufacturing. You're using 1/10 of the materials because you're building up a whole product. You're not cutting it away. And a lot of the 3D printing is using recycled plastic, recycled paper, recycled metal. All you have is the cost of collection. And now we're starting to power those 3D printers with our own solar and wind off-grid, zero marginal cost. And we're beginning to send it to market in electric vehicles at very low marginal cost. And in a few years, there'll be driverless or drones taking it to the market or the sharing economy. Real reduction in marginal cost of transport. The best way to understand this transition is toys. Has anybody here been to Ravensburg, Germany, where they invented the commercial toy, this beautiful medieval town? Don't you people travel to Germany? One person, thank you. You're probably German, right? Okay. So this is a beautiful medieval town. They came up with the commercial toy. So traditionally, a parent comes home, and when their little girl's about 2.5 or 3, they say, look, Santa Claus gets you toys at Christmas, but we're buying you this toy. We bought this at a store. This little toy is your property. This is not your brother's toy. It's not your sister's toy. It's your toy. You have to take care of it. They're introducing this little child to property and markets. And the first thing that kid heard from mom and dad, not my brother's toy or sister's toy. Power, status, and negotiation. They're learning that it's a possession to defend. It's property. Now we have millennial parents in their late 20s who are going up on these toy websites that are shared with thousands of toys by category. They pay a one-time subscription fee, then they're in the system. They're bringing the toy home to their 2.5-year-old daughter, and they're saying, another little girl really had fun with this toy. And she took really good care of it because she knew you'd want to play with this toy, and you'll take good care of it because one day someone else will play with the toy. The child is learning the toy is not a possession to defend. It's not property. It's not status. It doesn't identify who you are. It's an access to an experience for a moment. You steward it for the next person. I believe we're in a split system. The child will learn about property exchange and markets, absolutely. They're going to also learn at a very early age about access to experience in networks, and you pass it on. It's a hybrid system, part capitalist market, part sharing economy. They're getting ready to share the vehicles, share the homes with couch surfing and Airbnb, share everything. How do we pay for this? We have a memorandum that we put out here, correct? Digital Europe, has that been put out to everybody in this room? About a year, I hope it has. I've been told it was. About a year and a half ago, Prime Minister Renzi of Italy took over the rotating presidency of the EU and asked me to join him in Venice to declare Digital Europe, the next stage of the journey, which we did. The EU has always had to have a new vision periodically to move forward unless it stumbles back. We started with the coal and steel community. France, Germany, 6 countries came together. Energy, no more wars in the Ruhr Valley. We killed too many people over energy. Then the EU created Maastricht for a political union. Then the EU created the euro for a monetary union. Then the EU created the 28 member states for a geographic union. What's the next stage of the journey? Digital Europe. So I put together a memorandum which was supposed to be circulated to you for President Juncker and his leadership team, and it outlines this next journey that we're heading to in Europe. And that is to take this whole infrastructure and move it across the whole EU, region to region, like Nord-Pas-de-Calais, connect it like Wi-Fi for 1 billion people. 500 million in the Union, 500 million in the partnership regions in the Mediterranean. How do we pay for this? This is a discussion in Brussels that we've had. The money is there. It's absolutely there. It's just we're not spending it in the right ways. And in 2011, which was a bad recession year, for example, we spent $741 billion US equivalent dollars on infrastructure in Europe. Private and public monies, $741 billion. The money is there, but we're using it to build new old. We're pouring it into a second industrial revolution infrastructure, centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport, and we know that productivity maxed 20 years ago at 13 to 20% aggregate efficiency. If we simply reprioritize and spend 25% in each region of that European investment funds on the new platform like Nord-Pas-de-Calais has done, this generation will be able to turn the corner with a new journey. In March, the European Investment Bank changed its priorities. Chancellor Merkel, President Juncker came together with the president of the bank, and then they asked me to lay out this narrative, which we did, and the EIB has now changed its priorities. You want monies from the EIB in your region? Here are the big categories: digitalized communication, digitalized energy, digitalized transport. So now there's no excuse. Every industry will be involved in this rollout: telecom, cable, electricity power, logistics, transport, ICT, consumer electronics, manufacturing, because we have to build out an infrastructure here, a smart infrastructure. This will engage millions of workers because in France we have to retrofit every building in France in 30 years. We can't turn them into power plants and micro power plants until they're made efficient. That is hugely labor intensive. That's millions of jobs for the construction industry and new energy savings companies. And the way you pay for it is easy. The ESCOs get tax advantages from the government. They get loans from the banks. The banks are happy to give the loans because it's paid back through the energy efficiency savings. And then once that performance contract's paid out, the owners of the buildings get a free ride. They get a new building with energy efficiency. Then we have to install all the solar and wind and geothermal technology. Who's going to make all that technology? It should be made here in France, in the regions. Who's going to install it? Robots aren't going to install that. Millions of workers are going to install it. We have to change the entire electricity grid of France from dumb to smart and from servo-mechanical to digitalized. Who's going to lay out all the underground cable? Who's going to put in the smart meters in every single building in France, make sure they're operating and connected? It's a lot of workers. We have to take the transportation grid of France and transform it from dumb to smart road, rail, and water, and from internal combustion to electric and fuel cell. Who's going to put in the charging stations and the fuel outlets everywhere? The next 40 years is a massive build-out. The money is there. It needs to be reprioritized. And if little Nord-Pas-de-Calais can do this old industrial region of France, go there. I tell people to go there. Delegations are coming from around the world. We're in year 3. 3,000 businesses have come through seminars. All 7 universities created a consortium for a new pedagogy. We're taking 200 high schools there, and we're getting a credit from the EU for $850 million, leverage against private equity. They're going to turn all 200 high schools into data centers, power plants, and automated transport hubs as learning environments. And they're going to do that in the next 6 years. Those are just a few of the projects. Every region can do this. There's nothing mysterious about this. It's just changing the narrative and understanding the story. Lastly, the reason I wrote this book, this is an economic plan. This is not an environmental plan. This is an economic plan. But it's the only way I know that may give us any chance of addressing climate change between your generation, your children, and grandchildren. Zero marginal cost is the ultimate metric for reducing ecological footprint. Imagine if 7 billion people equipped with little smartphones at near zero marginal cost all day long can use analytics and algorithms and apps to find new ways to dramatically increase their aggregate efficiencies and productivity and reduce their costs. That means that more of us are using less of the Earth's resources, less of it and getting more out of it. We're not wasting it. We use less because we get more out of it in the transitions. Everyone can be their own efficiency experts here. The technology is cheap now as we interconnect. Then if what we do produce is shared, share the vehicles, share the toys, share the homes, that means more of us are using less of the Earth, and we're in a circular economy, and we're redistributing all this over and over again. Nothing goes to the landfill. That energy internet should be in 25 years. There's no reason why everyone shouldn't be producing their own energy, just like every one of you is your own communication system to the world for $25. and moving to automated transport where we all can be a hub for GPS guidance and sharing networks. Everything I've said tonight is being done right now. It's about scale up and build out and understanding the story. Last thought. I'm constantly asked whether I'm an optimist or a pessimist. I've never been an optimist and I've never been a pessimist. If one's a social activist, neither of those categories are at help at all. If you're an optimist, you're waiting around for the good news. If you're a pessimist, you're waiting around for the bad news. I'm only guardedly hopeful that we can achieve this transition, but I'm not naive. History is mercurial. Technology is not fate. It's not determined like a lot of futurists say. It's just an enabling mechanism. There are periods in history where good ideas are pushed back, where events overwhelm our opportunity to move forward, where poor leadership or lack of will gets in the way, and just sometimes bad luck. But if there's a plan B to what I've outlined here, I have no idea what it could be. Stay in the second industrial revolution, a dying economy, no opportunity for a young digital generation, and climate change now prepared for mass extinction. Here's why I'm guardedly hopeful. I'll leave you with this. There are three changes in consciousness that I've noticed, and you digital young generation here, tell me if this is right. I'm noticing a change in consciousness in 3 categories of life that are fundamental between the older generation and the digital generation. Number 1, our different ideas about freedom. Number 2, our different ideas about power. And number 3, our different ideas about community. My generation has a very, very well thought out view of freedom. It started with the French and the American Revolution. Each individual is a sovereign agent. Each individual drives for their own autonomy. Each individual seeks to be self-sufficient, not dependent, not beholden, an island to ourselves. We are each sovereign. We are autonomous agents. For us, freedom is exclusivity. For a young generation, growing up digital, connected in Skyping and global classrooms, in Facebook with 1 billion other young people, the idea of autonomy must be death. I want to be autonomous. Is there any person under the age of 30 that wants to be an island to themselves, not beholden to others? You grew up on interconnectivity on the internet, and for you, freedom is the ability to share in more and more complex networks and relationships in greater communities of meaning. Identity is not bound up by autonomy, it's bound up by the richness of the relationships, correct? We're going to have to rewrite the Constitution. We're going to have to rewrite French and American history here because this is a different idea of freedom. There's a difference in the notion of power. Our generation, since post-Westphalia and the nation state, we grew up with power. We know what it is. It's a pyramid. There's no other way to define power. There's some at the top and then the rest at the bottom. But for your generation, when you view an institutional behavior, whether you view a government or your business school here or a political party or any other institution, you ask, is the institutional behavior centralized, vertically integrated, patriarchal, top-down, proprietary, and closed, or is this institutional behavior distributed, collaborative, open source, laterally scaled? Do I have this right? For you, power is lateral. And that is, you found out from your own experience in interconnectivity that the more you share your talents with the network, the more social capital you create, and the network benefits everyone in this. You are a generation of social entrepreneurs. Apparently, you didn't read Adam Smith. Adam Smith said every individual only wants to pursue their self-interest and never ever cares about the public interest, but in pursuing their self-interest, somehow the common good is bettered. But this generation of social entrepreneurs, you believe that by giving your talents open source to the networks you're in, it benefits the network and increases the social capital of each of the participants. That is a sea change. Finally, the notion of community. I grew up in a post-Westphalia geopolitical world. Each individual is a sovereign, and every nation's a sovereign, and the nations, on behalf of the sovereign individuals, compete with other nations, both in the marketplace and the battlefield, for scarce resources in a zero-sum game. But we have a younger generation now growing up in this Internet of Things platform of a third industrial revolution, and you're just beginning to experience the biosphere as your indivisible community. The biosphere is that sheath. It's only 40 miles from the stratosphere to the oceans, where all life and chemicals interact to establish the ecosystems of life on this little oasis in the universe. We have young people coming home now, and they have biosphere consciousness. They're coming home, teenagers, and they're saying, why is Dad using so much water while he's shaving? We're wasting the energy of the planet. Why is the television on, that little red light? There's nobody in that room. We're wasting the resources of the planet. Why do we have 2 cars sitting in the driveway most of the week? Why don't we car share? We're wasting the materials of the planet. And the one I particularly like, even here in Paris it's starting, where did that piece of steak come from? That's the real revolution here. Where'd that beef come from? We've got teenagers coming home and they're saying, did this hamburger come from a rainforest? Did they have to destroy the trees for 4 inches of topsoil to graze that little cow for my burger? And the kids are smart because they know those trees are the home of rare species of animal and plants that will go extinct if those tree canopies go down. And they know if the trees are destroyed to graze the cow for the hamburger on the plate, it means the trees aren't there to absorb CO2 from industrial emissions and the planet's temperature goes up from deforestation. And if that happens, they understand that some farmer can't feed her children because she's got spring floods and summer droughts because of the hamburger on the plate. These young people, these high school students, are starting to learn ecological footprint. They're learning that everything we do intimately affects the well-being of all of our fellow human beings and our fellow creatures, our ecosystems, and our planet. It is actually true that when a butterfly flaps its wings, the universe changes. We know this in our biosphere. So we're beginning to understand, a younger generation, that ecological footprint means my well-being depends on the well-being of all the other creatures that live together in this evolutionary family in this one biosphere community. It is the indivisible community. We say in America, one nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Actually, it's one biosphere indivisible, with freedom to be able to flourish on this beautiful planet where life exists. Here's my hope. Started here at HEC. This is one of the top-ranked business schools in the world. We got a generation in this room tonight. Start a revolution. Rethink. It always starts in Paris, by the way. Troublemakers. Start a revolution. Theory and practice revolution. Rethink economic theory and practice. Introduce the laws of energy and thermodynamics into the curriculum. Make sure that sustainability isn't just a whitewashed or greenwashed word, but make sure sustainability means we change our business models, we change the way we relate to our fellow creatures, we change the way we organize life on this planet. It starts with a young generation. And with your business school, join together with other business schools. Start moving this new Internet of Things platform, Third Industrial Revolution, out into every region of the world. And here in the business school, help the regions do it. Put your pedagogy into the community so that whatever you're learning here, you're learning in the community and hopefully getting credits here from the teachers, faculty. If not you, who? The best and brightest here in these business schools, it's an obligation, it's a responsibility. And the real bottom line here, for all of you who are 18 and 22, when you're my age, your grandchildren are going to look back at you and they're going to either be in a cataclysm or they're going to be in an earth that's starting to be replenished, and they're going to ask you, what did you do? And what you want to say to them is that we took control of our destiny. We went out of the kind of customary day-to-day world and we imprinted an indelible stamp on the future. We did it with steadfastness, with humility, with care, in a sense of deep play. Not deep work, deep play. And together, a young generation helped change the world so that we could make this planet worth living in again. And the last thing I would say, the less you think when you get older, you start to learn about things. I can tell you I'm 70. I'm as confused today as I was 20. The only thing I know is when I get up every morning, life, I'm not sure what this is. It's such a mysterious little experiment. It is the only thing that's really awesome. All the other awesomes are negations. This is really awesome. It's life. It's existence. We want it. No matter how poor our condition, people crave life every day. And so do our fellow creatures. They struggle for life, and they have a right to be here with us or without us. And they're as irreducible important as we are. So what I'm hoping here, it's the struggle for life. We want to make sure that this little experiment in the universe goes on, that unborn, not yet here, our species, our fellow creatures, can enjoy their moment to flourish. Good night.